So, we saw the manuscript 472, Lambeth Palace, had this symbol called the obelisk. And what the obelisk showed us is that, yes, the verse was included when the manuscript was copied, but a scribe came along and said, wait a minute, that's not supposed to be in there. That's a doubtful verse. And, Michael, if you had seen that, you would have had the same reaction I did. When I first saw this, I said, well, I guess Michael's wrong. And I guess Nestle Allen 26 and 27 are wrong.
Yeah.
Which is these are, and von Soden is wrong. These are heavy authorities, yet, you know what? They could be wrong. I want to see the evidence for myself. Just show me show me the facts, show me the documents. But it turns out that they weren't wrong. There was a nuance there. And in a sense, this is actually more powerful than if Lambeth Palace left out John 6:4. Because if Lambeth Palace was missing John 6:4, you could never know, was it left out by accident or was it not there because the source didn't have it? And that source, did that leave it out by accident or was it left out because its source didn't have it? You would never know. But when they mark it with an obelisk, that's such a deliberate action to say, we don't consider this to have authority. Let me read again how Metzger described it, and he's talking about the passage in the adulterous woman. He says it is marked with asterisks or obelisks, indicating that though the scribes included the account, they were aware that it lacked satisfactory credentials. And so John 6:4, according to this Lambeth Palace manuscript, lacks satisfactory credentials. That's actually more significant than if the verse had been left out. There's another manuscript where it's marked with an obelisk. And by the way, I should point out there's some confusion in New Testament studies about the meaning of obelisk and asterisk within the sources themselves. Some call this symbol up here, here, let's zoom in. Some will call this an obelisk and others will call it an asterisk. I would call it an asterisk in modern English, but in the ancient sources, some refer to this as the obelisk, and in modern times it's referred to as an obelisk. This is another manuscript, minuscule 748 from the 12th century. It's in Paris, Bibliothèque Nationale de France, supplement Greek 903, and you can see the word Pascha there. It says the Passover. That's in there, but the verse is marked with an obelisk, telling you this is a doubtful verse. So now we have two manuscripts where it is marked with an obelisk. Interestingly, the first one, 472, is mentioned in TNT, this Textual text work from 2005, but not in the list of manuscripts that have an obelisk. So TNT miscategorized this manuscript. How many more did they miscategorize? We'll get back to that. Here's manuscript number 178. This one is in Rome in the Biblioteca Angelica, Greek manuscript number 123 from the 12th century. Notice these are all 11th, 12th century and around that time. And there, I'll zoom in and show you. You can see this is John 6:4. The last two words in the line are to, pa, and then it says cha. They actually broke the word in the middle. The Passover. And in the margin, we have the symbol we know as an asterisk. And some of the church fathers writing about the symbol, they actually refer to it apparently as the symbol we use to mark fractions, which is interesting, or division. But they called this the asterisk. This was a symbol used to say, hey, we know this verse is in there, but we don't think it should be. Now we've seen it in 3 manuscripts. Here's another one, manuscript 187 in Florence, Italy. And this one is in the Biblioteca Medicaea Laurentiana. You guys have heard of the Medicis? Mm-hmm. This is the Medicis' personal library. The Medicis were these people in Italy who had immense power. I think there was even a pope who was a Medici. And let's zoom in there. You can see there in the margin we have the asterisk symbol. This one's from the 11th century, right? So we're seeing 11th and 12th century. This is now, I believe, is this the 4th one? Yeah, this is the 4th manuscript from the 11th and 12th century. And here it's marked in 2 places. It's in the margin, and it's also at the beginning of John 6:4 in the body of the text. And here you can actually see something that we couldn't see with Lambeth Palace. Lambeth Palace mentioned that the obelisk was red, but we only had a black and white photo, so we didn't know what color it actually was other than taking his word for it. Here you can see it's red. It's in a different color ink. So the original scribe wrote John 6:4, and another scribe came along and said, uh-oh, we got a problem here. That's not supposed to be in there. That is, and he put a red asterisk. Next one is minuscule 2525. This one is in Athens. This is relatively late. It's 13th century. We've seen 11th, 12th, and 13th century, 5 manuscripts. This one has 2 symbols. It has the asterisk, and it also has a symbol at the end called the metabolus. The metabolus marks the end of a doubtful section. It tells you, hey, it's just this one verse that we're dealing with. The other ones, that was implied. Here it's explicit, telling you this is doubtful. What this shows you indisputably is that there was a tradition among the scribes who copied these manuscripts that John 6:4 was doubtful. 5 different manuscripts where we have this preserved, telling us, and who knows how many more there are that were missed. I don't know. We'll find out. To find that out, work with John here. Write to john64@gmail.com.
We're going to have John back on Shabbat Night Live with an update as this thing develops.
Amen.
Yeah. Let's have them both back, okay?
Now, those were the 5 manuscripts where John 6:4 is marked as doubtful. We also have manuscripts where something a little bit different happened, and this one's kind of cool. In minuscule 163, dated to the year 1193, and I should point out, this is the only one of the manuscripts we're going to see today where we have a specific date. In all the other ones, we have a century, and because they're incomplete, we don't know the exact date. Here we have what's called the colophon, and it tells us the date is the year 1193. This was in the Vatican, Barb, Greek 520. And here in the margin, we'll zoom in. What do we have in the margin? No asterisk and obelisk. What we have in the margin is John 6:4. Whoa! Now, my first thought here is that John 6:4 was added by a later scribe. That is not what happened. I contacted my colleague in Greece, Dr. Pavlos Vasiliadis, and I said, can you determine if this was written by the original scribe or a later scribe? And he sent this manuscript to the 2 top paleographers in Greece, top people in the world, and they both independently said, this is written by the original scribe. So there's 2 possibilities. One is the original scribe made a mistake, caught his own mistake, and fixed it. The other possibility, and I think this is the trend we're seeing, is that his source didn't have John 6:4. And when he copied this, there was no John 6:4. During the proofreading, he said, wait a minute, I remember there was something there to support the 3.5-year ministry, and he went to a different manuscript and he copied it into the margin. That's what I think probably happened. I can't prove it 100%, but that's why we're not just looking at one manuscript, we're looking at the cumulative evidence.
Or he could have just had another manuscript. He was checking against the one he copied and said, hey, this one has it.
Yeah.
Let me write it in the margin just in case this belongs.
But what you can see is the original version did not have it, and that's why TNT, Textual and Textwork, put this as 163 with a little star, which means a second hand, meaning it was added in. Von Soden, we mentioned before, has 472 in his apparatus, but he also has 850. And the interesting thing about 850 is 850 is not mentioned in this book from 2005 in German. So if you only went by the 2005 German book, you wouldn't know about 850. 850 is also in the Vatican. We saw before Barb Greek 520. This is Barb Greek 504. And here is Vatican Greek 504. And this one's really interesting because this one is a commentary of Cyril of Alexandria. However, within the text, they have the gospel itself. In other words, what they would do is copy 3 or 4 verses and then bring a section of the commentary, copy several more verses, add Cyril's commentary. And so we end up with a text of the gospel, a full text of the gospel of John, embedded in a commentary of Cyril of Alexandria. And many of the 5,800 plus manuscripts of the New Testament are actually commentaries. And this is different than what we talked about before, by the way. Before we talked about citations. Citations are where the church father quotes the New Testament. This is not Cyril quoting the New Testament. This is the copyist of Cyril saying, hey, this commentary will be a lot more useful if I don't have to look back and forth between 2 different books. And so he includes the gospel text as part of the commentary. Cyril's original commentary didn't have the full gospel text. That was added in later by one of the copyists But the important thing for our question is, what about John 6:4? And guess what? John 6:4 is not in the gospel text of Barb's Greek 504. It's missing in the text. I can show you here. The part that has the gospel text is marked in the margin with sort of a quotation mark, the double apostrophe. That whole section there on the right-hand side is gospel text. That's not Searle's commentary. It's completely separate. And where I put the red circle there is where John 6:4 should have appeared, but it doesn't appear. Now you see that's the end of a section, because then what continues is the commentary. So this is the next section. So it ends here with John 6:3, and it picks up on the next page where there's the double apostrophe with John 6:5. There is no John 6:4 in the gospel text of this manuscript 850. That's the first one where it's actually not just in the margin noted, but it's completely missing. Here's another one, minuscule 2206 from the 11th century. It's from the 15th century, but it's a commentary just like the other one. And this is a commentary by a guy named Theophylact of Ohrid, and he lived in the 11th century, but the manuscript is from the 15th century, and it is missing John 6:4. John 6:4 should be where I put the red mark there, and it just has John 6:3 followed by John 6:5. Now this is mentioned by TNT, the book from 2005. Here's another one, another manuscript. This is minuscule 1634. This is the one that was mentioned by Nestle Allen 27, beginning in the year 2006, the 9th corrected printing. And I wanted to verify that they were right. Just because they said it doesn't mean it's true. I want to see the sources for myself. And this one is in the Mount Athos in Greece. It's called the Great Lavra Monastery, Omega 125 from the 14th century. And there you see the part I put a circle in. That is where John 6:4 should be. Before it immediately is John 6:3. And immediately after that circle is John 6:5. But there ain't no John 6:4. So in 3 manuscripts, it's completely missing. In a 4th manuscript, it's written in the margin. And in 5 manuscripts, it's marked as doubtful. 9 manuscripts either have John 6:4 missing in the margin or marked as doubtful. So this isn't just a speculation. It's not an emendation. It is an actual textual variant. Now, let's put that in context. Let's be totally upfront here. According to Text and Textwerk, there's 1,653 manuscripts that do have John 6:4. And that includes some of the most important manuscripts of the New Testament, P66, P75, Vaticanus, Sinaiticus, etc., Bezai. Some very important manuscripts have John 6:4, but it has survived, 9 manuscripts have survived where it's either missing in the margin or doubtful. What's interesting is in their list of, and now you understand a little bit better, where it says verse 4, come, which is Greek for with, Latin, with asterisk or obelisk is what it saes in Latin, okay? And it lists 6 manuscripts that have the asterisk or the obelisk. I actually found that they were wrong about 2 of those. And then there was one they didn't mention, right? So they're mentioning 6. 4 of those are right. And then 472 they have in the category where John 6:4 is just there without an asterisk or obelisk. It's just there. And that's wrong. You saw the obelisk for yourself. What about the other 2 they were wrong about? And the bigger question that we really want the answer to is, what about those 1,653? 850, where's 850? 850 is included in the 1,653 that have John 6:4, and 850 doesn't have it. So they're actually wrong about that. Now, to be fair, they probably had some researcher who might have been a junior researcher who's looking through microfilm after microfilm after microfilm, and the guy had some bad pizza the night before and he makes a mistake, right? I don't know what happened, but it's something like that. And this happens, right? You have 1,653 and their attitude is, okay, well, we're probably right on 1,600 of them, right? Okay, that's enough, right? And they could be right. They could be right on 1,650 of them. But if there's 3 more where John 6:4 is missing, I'd like to know about that, wouldn't you? He's going to find out. With your help. Now, here's one of the manuscripts where TNT was wrong, and they said there was an obelisk or an asterisk, and what actually was in the margin is some kind of other symbol that they mistook for an asterisk or an obelisk. And this happens. They just made a mistake. There was some junior researcher who didn't know what he was looking at. And it's not an asterisk or an obelisk. So we can't count that manuscript even though it's listed by, I mean, this is an authoritative source, TNT. If you ask any New Testament professor in the world, what about John 6:4? And we did. They'll refer you to TNT if they know what they're talking about. And we look up the sources in TNT and we find out it's not always right. Here's another one. This one's almost a comical mistake. Here there actually is an obelisk in the margin, or it's actually in the body of the text. It's kind of hard to see there in the image, but there's an obelisk there. And it's on John 6:5, and it's on two words that were forgotten from John 6:5, and they were written in the margin. So it's not telling you anything about John 6:4 at all. It's telling you that there were two words that were accidentally left out and put in the margin. Nothing to do with John 6:4 at all. But you can imagine what happened here. There was some probably junior researcher. They said, go check all these manuscripts for John 6:4. He wasn't looking at John 6:5. He just saw the asterisk, and he figured, oh, there it is. That's what I was looking for. No. You got to look at everything in its context and weigh all the evidence and, not just look for things that prove your theory, right? Because we could have done that. We could have said, oh, TNT says there's, these two other manuscripts. Yeah, but they don't stand up to scrutiny. We checked them and they fell apart. So what we have is 9 solid manuscripts, and they all date from the 11th to the 15th centuries. John 6:4 is either missing in the margin or it's obelized, astericized, written with an asterisk. We want to find more. And so write to john64@gmail.com, and he'll put you to work looking for, you're going to have to learn a little bit of Greek. It's not that easy. But in order to get through 1,652 more manuscripts, we got our work cut out for us. And he's already looked through a few hundred.